The night was heavy with the scent of impending rain as I drove down the desolate road, surrounded by a forest so thick it seemed to swallow the moonlight. My headlights cut through the darkness like a beacon of hope, but the feeling of unease gnawed at the edges of my mind. I had received an invitation to a secluded cabin nestled deep within these woods, a retreat, they called it. The promise of solitude and a chance to escape the chaos of the world had drawn me in, despite the warnings from friends about the area's ominous reputation. As I rounded a bend, my heart skipped a beat. Standing in the middle of the road was a figure, barely illuminated by my headlights. A hitchhiker, perhaps. I slowed down, my curiosity piqued, but as I drew closer, I realized there was something terribly wrong. The figure's movements were jerky and unnatural, like a marionette being controlled by invisible strings. A chill ran down my spine as I swerved to avoid it, my tires screeching against the asphalt. But when I glanced in the rearview mirror, the figure was gone, as if it had never been there at all. Shaken but determined, I pressed on, the cabin's coordinates programmed into my GPS. The road twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the heart of the forest. Shadows danced in the trees, and the wind whispered secrets I couldn't decipher. Finally, after what felt like hours, I spotted the cabin, a solitary structure nestled among the trees, its windows dark and foreboding. As I stepped out of the car, a sense of dread washed over me, but I pushed it aside, attributing it to the long drive and the eerie surroundings. Inside, the cabin was musty and cold, the air thick with the scent of decay. I lit a fire in the fireplace, hoping to chase away the chill that seemed to seep into my bones. But no matter how high I piled the logs, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside sent shivers down my spine. And then, just as I was on the verge of drifting off, I heard it, the sound of whispers, faint and indistinct, coming from somewhere deep within the woods. I told myself it was just the wind playing tricks on my mind, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they seemed to surround me on all sides. I clutched the covers tightly, my heart pounding in my chest, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't block them out. And then, just as suddenly as they had started, the whispers stopped, leaving behind an eerie silence that was almost worse than the sound itself. I lay there for what felt like hours, my senses on high alert, but nothing else disturbed the stillness of the night. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen in the cabin. Objects moved of their own accord, doors slammed shut without warning, and the temperature plummeted to icy depths that seemed impossible for the time of year. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that the stress of my everyday life was playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew that something was terribly wrong. And as the days turned into weeks, the feeling of unease that had plagued me since my arrival only grew stronger. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an old journal hidden in the attic that I began to piece together the truth. The cabin, it seemed, had a dark history, one that stretched back centuries, to a time when the land was inhabited by a tribe of ancient witches who practiced dark magic in the shadows of the forest. According to the journal, the witches had been driven from their homes by the early settlers, their legacy all but forgotten by the passage of time. But their spirits still lingered in the woods, bound to the land by the powerful magic they had wielded in life. And now, it seemed, they were seeking revenge on anyone foolish enough to disturb their eternal slumber. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I knew that I had to leave the cabin before it was too late. But as I made my way to the door, a sense of dread washed over me, and I realized that the witches would never let me go so easily. Sure enough, as I stepped outside, I was greeted by a chorus of whispers, louder and more insistent than ever before. Shadows danced in the trees, and the wind howled with a fury that seemed almost alive. But I refused to be cowed by fear. With a final glance back at the cabin, I sprinted for my car, the witches' cries echoing in my ears as I raced down the desolate road, desperate to escape the nightmare that had become my reality. Epilogue. As I drove away from the cabin, the whispers faded into the distance, replaced by the sound of my own ragged breathing. I knew that I would never forget the horrors I had witnessed in those woods, but I also knew that I had survived, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable evil. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, I couldn't shake the feeling that the witches were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their next victim to wander down that desolate road. And I knew that no matter how far I ran, I would never truly be free from their grasp.